Hi everybody, welcome to 3D6 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game, and community news. We stream live on Twitch every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/3d6charge. Tonight's episode, let's talk about Chapter Approved. Came out recently, and joining me in doing so is Kevin Lieb.
Howdy, howdy.
Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hey everyone.
And me, Chris Vo. So, have you guys had a chance to look over the new missions and points yet? I mean, like, it's NDA's dropped Saturday. A lot of leaks have been going around.
So, Ben and I went to a team tournament on Saturday, and all of our discussion during not playing games was about Chapter Approved, so, yeah.
Yep. we played our games, and then we would be like, all right, we got half an hour. Let's talk about Chapter Approved. Oh, an hour in the car both ways. Talk about Chapter Approved. Yeah, we've certainly discussed it and looked at it all. Lots going on there. A lot to dig through. I haven't gotten a chance to practice any of the missions because, like Kevin said, we were playing a team tournament. But yeah, it's very different.
Yeah,
and
so
I think it's good.
For the uninitiated, Chapter. What are they calling it?
Yep.
It's the annual update to the GT mission packet and a flight points update.
I don't believe it's annual.
Yeah, they're supposed to be doing it like annual now.
Yeah.
It's we're gonna have seasons in Warhammer, and this is the first season.
Yeah, so calling
so
it
every season is going to be a different war zone.
Yeah, so calling it
featuring...
Chapter Approved 2022 is kind of a misnomer, but that's fast. But yeah, the two important things: new points values for units and new missions. And you can't really talk about one without the other because they're kind of intertwined. If missions change to support a certain type of unit better, but those units, cheaper. There's just there's an effect that goes both ways. So that being said, I guys think we should start.
For this episode, the plan is we're going to mostly talk about points, but in order to talk about points, we do need to, recognize what is better, what is worse this season. So we're going to do real quick, just like broad strokes. What's the major differences with the missions? And then we'll dive into like the points changes and how that might make sense in some context of the missions. So we're not going to go over any of the missions today, but we are going to certainly say, what is more important than it was last time? What's less important than it was last time? Kevin, you want to start us off? Because I think you're the one of us who's dived the most into these so far.
So, as many of you probably already know, there's now two parts to the primary. The old part that is now 4 points, 8 points, 12 points, but you're doing the same thing as you were before, and some other thing that you have to do. Now, a lot of these are actions, these other things you have to do, and if they are actions, they either can only be done by models with OPSEC or done better with models with OPSEC. For instance, there's one where you have to do an action. If you have OPSEC, you complete it at the end of your turn. Otherwise, you have to it completes at the beginning of your next turn. So,
yeah, or things like the action fails half the time unless you have OPSEC.
Yeah. So this OPSEC was already great, but now permanent models that have permanent OPSEC, either troops or like, for instance, Necrons with the chapter that makes all their models OPSEC, are way higher in my book.
All I could think of when I saw these changes is that Cult of Trickery can give their Rhinos OPSEC and then do all these actions. I don't know if this is good, but it's where my mind goes. And like, that might be like a bit too much of a meme, but I think there's a lot of armies that have abilities to give random things OPSEC, especially characters that are just going to really be able to abuse that. Custodes in particular, having older characters of OPSEC, having the ability to have your captain just be like, yeah, my captain is doing this action, my troops can go off and do something else, is like pretty sweet.
It makes certain small gribbly units that we used to take to do generic actions now only good if they can get OBSEC. Like I think crypto thralls are a great example of this, where before you could kind of see crypto thralls in any Necron list, but now you're probably only going to see crypto thralls in Eternal Conquerors lists where they have OBSEC.
Yeah,
and nowhere else.
Yeah, and then stack on top of that, a lot of the secondaries changed around too to not allow small units to do them. A lot of the secondaries fail if your squads are too small, or don't count your squad if you're less than a certain number of models. Either the breakpoints are oftentimes 3 or 5. And this just kind of like kills a lot of 2-man squads like Crypto Thralls, Crusaders, Death Cult Assassins. Although it should be noted, Death Cult Assassins can go to 3. Like you can just put a third dude in that squad, and then that unit starts counting for some of those things again. I think Crusaders can as well, actually. But that's like, I believe only engage is 3. If you want to be able to do Rod, you have to go back up to 6. And then if you want to be able to do any of these mission things, you have to have OBSEC, which just means they're never going to qualify for it. So a lot of these units have just lost a ton of value.
Yeah. Other changes that we've seen in these missions are pretty much everyone has like a passive effect going on for your army. So an example might be you can't be in no man's land and you can't scout move into no man's land before the first battle round. Or you can't get command points unless you're holding an objective that's in no man's land. Or you can't get command points if you don't have your warlord, or you can't get command points. I believe there's a third one. Let's just say like
you have to hold a no man's land objective to have command points.
There's one where you have to hold your own objective to have command points.
Yeah, that one's fine. Like if you're not holding your own objective, the game is probably over in some other gross way. So like I guess get punished more. It doesn't really matter. The one where you're like you have to hold the center of the table to score points is ridiculous to me. Like that's yikes.
Yeah, but the point is, I think that CP regen is no longer like 100% guaranteed. Getting a lot, which again puts more emphasis on those units with OBSEC baked in, because like there's plenty of armies out there that can pay CP to make a unit OBSEC for a turn, but again, since the CP is not guaranteed, that inherently makes it a little bit less viable part of your game.
Yeah, and these rules are not all in the same mission, so each mission has a different sort of weird scenario that might come up, and most of these scenarios aren't like, I don't think, massively punishing, but you do need to be careful that like you don't build your army so that one of them becomes massively punishing. The only one that like really jumps out to me as like, oh, that's gross, is the one that requires your warlord to be on the table. Like Imperial Knights, their warlords tend to be like the scariest thing on their army. Like your warlord is usually like your Knight Megara. For Chaos Knights, it's always your Knight Megara because that's the only way you can get a warlord trait on a Knight Megara. And like, what do Knight Megaras do? They charge into combat because that's why they're better than normal knights. And now you're just like, man, if I lose my warlord on turn 2, I'm out 3 command points. That seems terrible.
And you're already kind of light on command points and need all of them.
Yeah, the one where you have to hold an objective in the middle, and then the one where you can't scout to play have these weird tension where it's like, oh, I want to bring a scout unit so I can get command points on my first turn, but also I could bring scout units and half their points value is worthless because I can't scout deploy them. It's like, woo, fun.
Yeah, this brings me more and more to the point where like, I really want RTTs to announce what missions. If you're not playing all 5, like just tell me. Like if you're not like a 10-round tournament and there's 9 of these missions and you're not running all 9, like tell me which 3 we're playing, because you can literally show up with an army and you're like, all right, well, I brought a bunch of scout stuff so I can do that one. And you just end up playing like Kevin said, you just play the one where your scouts get turned off and you never play that one. And now you've paid, I don't know, 30 to 50 points to like get this effect that you lost for a mission without gaining the benefit that you were trying to get. So like, I don't know. But let's try to summarize real quick. Things got trickier. Secondaries got even more important because the primary is about the same, except worth fewer points. And now there's this sort of 4th pre-selected secondary baked into every mission. So your ability to complete these pre-selected secondaries are like even more important. So having these like really all-rounder armies that can just kind of do what you need them to do is like do actions, have action monkeys, have obsec action monkeys now, which is sort of a new unit type. Like we haven't needed obsec units that are good at going off and doing actions before. Kind of changes the weight on like who's good and who's not. So yeah, I see these like small like non-obsec like action monkey units basically going away. I just like don't think they're good anymore, and we didn't see point changes to a lot of them, even
the
though
circumstances
a
change.
lot of them are very meta defining. Like lictors are insane. They're like 37 points,
totally
and they can do
fucking dead
any
now.
secondary you want them to in the current edition or the current rules packet. And they did not go up a single point because in the next rules packet, they kind of don't do anything. Like they can't engage, they can't rod or retrieve Nachmund now. They don't do most of these actions. Like I just don't want lictors in my army. They don't do anything.
So we never got to see it, and this will be a good transition into our first points discussion. Alar's Terminators are kind of like lictors in that you can bring them in one-man squads, and under the old missions, they could have done the majority of your actions for you. Because it's very hard to screen out 140 millimeter base, and you look under these new missions, and all of a sudden that utility is gone. This is part of the reason why when Ben and I were talking about like how could they possibly have released points changes to Custodes without Custodes seeing play, it's like, well, it turns out in a world where your single mana Lars Custodians can do actions and are a great utility, they're worth 65 points. In a world where you have to bring 5 of them to do actions consistently, they're worth 60 because.
So yeah, we kind of were for a while. We went back and forth on like this is ridiculous. Why would you ever release a book and then immediately release point changes for it? And now I think we're both on the same page. We are fairly confident that what happened is the Custodes book got released. It went through development under our current mission packet, and then it got put on a bus and sent to the factories to print. And 20 minutes later, someone comes bursting into the room and goes, "Hey guys, here's the new mission packet." And the guys here at the Custodes book goes, "Oh wow." The plan for Custodes was we bring 3 1-mana Lures Terminators, and they do everything. And now they do nothing. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin. So Custodes count as 2 models for OBSEC, right? Do they count as 2 models for actions?
No.
Yeah, it's like OBSEC and also Bodyguard. So they're also like really bad at all these secondaries, and they weren't previously. So I'm fairly confident that the reason Custodes got a bunch of point boosts, which they did, spoiler alert, is because their current book is completely fine for the let's call it the 2021 season's missions. And their new book is abysmally bad at the Nachmund missions. Like the 5-man infantry squads to do actions, like that's like 270 points. Like they're really expensive. So I think that's why we see these Custodes drops, because Custodes are going to really struggle with these new missions. Even if baseline playing the primary, they're going to be very good at it. And when I say the primary, they're also going to be good at like that new bonus thing. Because all those bonus things don't care how big your units are. They just care, do you have OBSEC? And for Custodes, yes, they have OBSEC. So they're going to be good at the primary and they're going to be good at the bonus. But I think their secondary game just got way harder.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I think that their point changes are reasonable. However, it's literally a new book. So I don't know how much we could really talk about like, oh, this got better, this got worse. Like, I don't know where these things started at. Like, I've played a game against them and I've watched 3 games of them, but I don't feel like I have enough background knowledge to like really say like this felt busted and now it's gone down. But
there are some weird things.
What do you think?
There's some weird things. I don't think necessarily Trajan should have gone down. Like, he seemed insane at 170 and him at 160 just seems like you must take him every time.
Fair.
But that's like 1 model in your entire army and 10 points. That's not a lot. I like that Mesocordias are all free because Custodes on a whole should probably be better number of attacks at least wise at mowing down guardsmen than intercessors. Like there's no reason why they. I get the quality of the attack is better, but like the same number is just weird. Like that's kind of like the Custode Shock Assault. So like
also from a design standpoint, I completely detest tiny little fiddly bits that you glue or don't glue to your models over and over based on if they cost points or not. And like every list will have a different number of them. Mesocourtiers are a classic. The other one is like the Tau Pulse Pistol. Like they cost 1 point, and like, man, I'm never gluing them to my models because like it just feels so foolish. Like that sort of thing should just be free, and I'm glad that Mesocourtiers are free now.
Yeah. I do have some concern that in the future they're not going to be free again, but that's a different scenario. I've looked at the Intercessor Ox Grenade Launcher, and I've seen it become free, not free, become 1 point, not 1 point.
5 points.
Now it's 5 points.
Is it really 5 right now? That's awful.
Well, it's now not a grenade; it's assault. So you fire it in addition to the gun. So it being 5 points is
that's
very
fair.
It's worth the 5 points.
But that's a lot.
It doesn't
better.
make or break the unit. 5 points is fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Can we
talk about guard for a moment?
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk about.
The reason I want to talk about guard is at the beginning of our spiel, I said, you know what's really good now? OBSEC Action Monkey units. And that's not a type that we've really seen before. Except you know what's a really good OBSEC Action Monkey? Guardsmen. There's just 10 of them. They don't cost any points. And they just, you don't give a crap if they die in droves, because you can bring like actually 100 of them for like less than a quarter of your list.
And they haul ass.
Actually, that's not true anymore. But about a quarter of your list.
Haul ass.
They're good at every single secondary. Like engaged null fronts, they're 10 dudes. They count. Rod, excellent. They're 10 dudes. They're troops. They could do it. To deploy teleport homers, they're troops. They do it at the end of the turn. All of these like mission bonuses, like every single one, you're like, you know what's good for this thing? Guardsmen. So yeah, Imperial Guard are still an awful army. But between this and the faction specific secondaries, which I don't know if we talked too much about. We talked about them last show a little bit.
We said they existed. We didn't really get into.
All right. The Guardsman one is every enemy model you destroy is worth a point. This is really good. It's like not particularly hard to destroy. Every unit, I should say. It's not particularly hard to destroy like 10 to 12 units, depending on what you're playing against. And there's gonna be lots of armies that you just like, it's just free. You're just gonna get 15 points. They brought a bunch of like 10-man action monkey squads. You just mowed them down. Now the reason why I mention about this is because Guard's currently not performing very well in the meta at all. And yet they ate nerfs. Their best unit, which is pretty easily full payload manticores, went up 10 points each, which is about a 20-point increase in most Guard lists. And I thought it was bizarre to see any changes whatsoever, like any negative changes whatsoever to Guard. I just figured like one of two things is going to happen to Guard. They're going to get buffs, or their book is close enough that GW just doesn't care and they do nothing to them. And I thought it was really weird that they got nerfs. Now, that being said, they did get buffs elsewhere. Lehman Russes of all kinds, commanders included, went down. So I think a lot of Guard lists are overall going to be about the same, because most lists that I've seen are like 2 commanders and 2 manticores. So this kind of makes all these changes weird. Like, why bother? You're just going to increase something by 20, decrease something by 20. I expect to see even more tank commanders, I guess. And I do think Guard overall is going to be better in this book than they were in the previous, or better in these missions than they were in the previous. But given, I think GW may have been like a little afraid that like, well, maybe there is a world where just like Guardsmen are the absolute best thing ever at doing these secondaries, and people start like dropping tank commanders or like more Guardsmen. And in that world, like manticores might need to be a little bit more expensive. And in the world where the current list just stays the same, well, then like no point changes have happened here. The list still costs the same number of points. So it's fine.
It just got better for the missions.
Yeah. So I think Guard players are probably going to be looking a little bit better in this mission packet than the previous one. Not necessarily because you got better at the mission or the secondaries, but everyone else got worse. Like, people have to bring tools they didn't have to bring before, and Guardsmen still just check all the boxes for, I want to do the mission secondaries and the mission actions. Also, Guardsmen in Valkyries just do everything. They actually do everything. It's great.
It's worth noting that ever since the Cadia supplement came out, it's kind of been decided that Cadia is the truth, from what I understand.
Yeah, you just
Um,
play Cadia.
This lines up exactly with one of the other key changes we forgot to mention. When you're building your army, you can only pick one subchapter when you have options.
Yes, this does hurt guard a bit. Guard players do oftentimes soup. Although I think the current lists are pretty heavy pretty usually they're usually monocadia. And now they're just all gonna be monocadia. I struggle to see factions other than Cadia seeing a lot of play, except for maybe Catachin. If light infantry start becoming a thing again with like the Tau and Eldar Codex releases, because Catachin guardsmen do just like punch Tau infantry to death. But I think it's just going to be Cadian.
Yeah. Just in case it wasn't clear what I talked about. So chapter, regiment, cult, dynastic code, dynasty. When you're building your army, you have to pick one for each one of these subsections, and you can't pick more than one for each one of those. You can mix and match. So, for instance, if I wanted to bring Ultramarines and Cadians in the same list, I could do that. This is really bad because Ultramarines, like without their super doctrine and doctrines, are bad models. But you can still do that. But you can't bring like Ultramarine intercessors and Iron Hand intercessors. I do believe you could bring an Iron Hand's army and reboot Gilman in a Supreme Command attachment, though, because he's not something you select.
Yeah, his brackets aren't selectable, so
just is
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, you could take like Mephiston and a bunch of Ultramarines if you put Mephiston as an auxiliary attachment. Like, you shouldn't. This is bad, but like it's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could take Abaddon with a bunch of Night Lords.
That might actually be good.
Abaddon with some word bearers might actually be fucking sick if these rumors. But that's.
All right. You want to talk? Want to talk about some Marines? The Marine changes are interesting. A lot of these changes to me. Sorry, I've just assumed that the answer is yes. Is the answer yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of these changes to me seem like they're trying to work on internal balance more than necessarily external balance. Which in some ways is good. Like, having books be diverse within themselves is always, I think, excellent. As like someone who plays many armies, I'm not ever like, oh no, I only have one thing to play, because I can just play a different army. But I know lots of people who own one army, and when their army is mono build, like they kind of just burn out after a couple months because like what's the point? You just play the same thing over and over. So that being said, Space Marine changes. Volkite Contemptors went up 10 points per Volkite they had. GW tried to express this as they went up 10 points, but that's a lie. They went up 20 because it's 10 points per Volkite and everyone just brings 2.
Yep.
I think this changes across the board. This is for Imperial and Chaos. For every faction that can bring Volkite Contemptors, they're up 10 points. Kevin, we talked about this change a lot. Wow. How do you... I think it's a miss. And if I remember correctly, that's also your opinion.
I think it's first off, this one feels 6 months late. Not a lot of these changes necessarily follow that paradigm of this made sense 6 months ago. But this Volkite one explicitly, it feels like it made sense 6 months ago because Volkite Contemptors have been on the out for the last 2 months. But it's also misunderstanding why they were even taken. Volkite Contemptors were like a solution to the Drakari menace, and explicitly very good into Drakari.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. And so, like, the second Drakari became Thick City, I mean, that's like the 2 month ago part of it, but like, it's like just like not understanding why this was taken. And also, it's like, it's probably fine to have like this weird option that's niche be good.
I think it's also misunderstanding the reason, like the other reason why Volkites were taken, and it's not because like they were like a super powerful gun. It's just that they were like least bad option. You know, for a lot of the sub factions, like say for like Death Guard, it was the one of the few places where you get like decent shooting.
I think Volkites are just a solution to a problem. And outside of Thousand Sons and Death Guard, the second Thick City became like the way you played your card. They just went away. Thousand Sons and Death Guard being capable of buffing their Volkites in a couple of different interesting ways, so that it's still like viable. But even then, like, I don't think Thousand Sons or Death Guard are like a problem in the meta. You can just like let them have their sweet toys. This change makes no sense to me. Like, I'm never going to touch them at 170 points in Thousand Sons, and I don't think Death Guard players are going to take them at 170 either. Like, they're just not good, and they weren't good before this change. And now they're awful. So this is just a complete miss for me, and it's disappointing because like Thick City needs to go away, which means that at some point people are going to start playing the other Drakari sort of builds, and if that build ends up being super dangerous, then we're just like not going to have this tool to kind of fight it in the meta, which stinks.
On the note of Dreadnoughts, Redemptors also went up 10 points. This is that internal balance thing where like most Space Marines lists started with 3 Redemptors because they were just very efficient. This is awkward because like this was one of Space Marine's best units, so it getting nerfed is just, it's really hurting the middle factions. Like I still think Iron Hands takes them and doesn't really feel too bad about it, and Black Templars take it because they're probably actually worth the 185 that they're now at.
Yeah, Black Templars, Redemptors are still just good. And this goes back to the Space Marine problem that we talk about every chapter approved. Like, Black Templar Redemptors at 175 might actually just be too good. And no other Space Marine chapters Redemptors at 175 are too good. Like, I think a Iron Hands Redemptor at 175 is like a little push, but not insane. You could convince me it's supposed to be 185. And theirs are, I'm pretty sure, just like worse than Black Templars. And then everyone else's are so much worse that like at 185, they're just probably not taking them anymore. But then, like, they have no legs to stand on because they're not playing Volkite Contemptors, they're not playing Redemptors. Like, what's your fire base? Like, Predators? Like, it's not Predators. And continuing on with Lake, Space Marines are dying for Black Templar sins. Bike Chaplains went up 10 points.
Bike Chaplains
I think that Black Templars Bike Chaplains needed to go up 10 points, and everyone else's probably didn't. This is a bit of an internal balance thing too. Like every list started with a Bike Chaplain. They were just the best model in the book. But that doesn't mean they were broken. And I didn't feel like Space Marine lists all felt the same because of that Bike Chaplain. Like the Triple Redemptor was starting to make a lot of Space Marine lists feel the same. The Bike Chaplain wasn't, because different people were doing very different things with their Bike Chaplains. Like Ultramarines were buffing their troops, Black Templars were murdering people in combat with it. Iron Hands were buffing vehicles, or were buffing dreadnoughts with them. Like, they all felt different. So I wasn't having an issue with like sameness with them. But like I said, I do think the Black Templars one needed to go up 10 points because the Black Templars Bike Chaplain, and by Bike Chaplain, I mean Bike Chaplains, because a lot of Black Templar lists are bringing more than one. I've seen multiple triple and quadruple Chaplain Black Templar lists where they take double Bike Chaplain plus Grimaldus. Like, yeah, like he needed to go up, and now all the other Space Marine lists are just suffering for it again, because Black Templars have the new book, so they're just more powerful than the other Space Marine chapters because they have pretty easily the best 9th edition supplement for Space Marines, and most of the other good chapters are in 8th edition supplements anyway.
Yeah. Another 9th edition supplement that did get a buff, and I think might actually start seeing a lot of play. Storm Speeders all went down 10 points. And Dark Angels has some really good Storm Speeders.
Because they got some 5-up invulnerable save
for free, much like 5-up invulnerable saves on Black Templar Redemptor Dreadnoughts.
It's okay. Black Templars can just also take the Storm Speeders because they also get 5-up invulnerable saves.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, no. So Black Templars can just cap that one's point cost for us too. I do think that the Storm Speeders, all going down 10 points, are going to open up some really sweet Ravenwing builds. Maybe not like tier 1 competitive Ravenwing builds, but like I have some friends who play Ravenwing, who are just like, yes, I get to like put my Storm Speeders on the table, and like they're just going to bring a bunch of Land Spears, and they're going to have a heck of a time zooming around the table with like a bunch of models that are actually sort of approaching efficient. So Again, I don't think this is crushing corners, but like be ready for it. Like this is a list that if you're not ready for it, like you just die. You're like, oh yeah, every model moves 20 inches, has an invulnerable save and multiple melta guns. If you're not prepared to like deal with that sort of firepower and mobility, you could just lose like very easily. Like you put a character in the wrong place, and all of a sudden you're just eating multiple meltas. Oops.
Devastator Centurion's down 15. I need to like look at a Devastator Centurion again. I'm pretty sure this does not move the mark on them being.
If I remember correctly, they're like approaching 100 points for like a dude with 4 wounds, and like going down 15 is not enough to make me interested in this model. They still don't have core. Like, yeah, they still don't have bolter discipline. We're not doing it. We're just like not doing it on this model.
We needed a small FAQ on Centurions, errata on Centurions, bolter discipline, to let them get the standstill and rapid fire at max range at the very least. The fact that they went from rapid firing at max range all the time to you could never rapid fire, even though your infantry is such a joke.
Yeah, it's not great.
Gladiator tanks down 15 points apiece. I like the Reaper and I like the Lancer now.
Replace your Redemptors with something.
Yeah, like's a little bit strong. I think you can put them in list now. I don't think like they're tier 1 competitive, but I think they might be where Space Marines go.
Yeah, I'm also kind of like joking. I still think Redemptors beat both of those things in terms of just efficiency, both in anti-tank and the anti-infantry version. But I could be convinced that there's a world where you're like on triple Redemptor and then you just like start putting Reapers in your list.
Yeah. I like the first Lancer because it kind of gets to play in the backfield and do some good shooting. Anyway.
That's fair.
Blood Angels had some of their very high-end things go down some points just to get them more in line. Nothing crazy.
Sanguinary Guard went down, didn't they? No?
Not from what I can see.
Just losing my mind? Okay.
It's death.
And I'm not, and like the joke is that they should. Like we've been complaining about Sanguinary Guard for quite some time. But man, all their weapons do 2 damage, so they're a complete joke now.
Are Sanguinary Guard Death Company?
No.
Then no, they did knock it down.
Death Company Intercessors are their own thing. Sanguinary Guard are like the Warlord's bodyguards. But they have a bunch of like 2 damage weapons, so they've kind of just been like hated out of the meta. Death Company Intercessors went down. And I still don't think this does anything for them. It's just like an extra attack on Intercessor is just not worth losing OBSEC for. And they're still more expensive than a normal Intercessor. Like, I don't want this.
Dark Angels themselves had some points decreases to their 2 flyers. Same with Deathwatch. I don't think any of these flyers are like gonna be making it there. Maybe 1 now.
I would not be surprised to see the Dark Talon see play. Its new profile is very interesting. It has an invulnerable save for being Raven Wing. It has 2 hurricane bolters and a gun that just shoots mortal wounds as its main gun. It was when I remember when the book first came out, I was thinking like this is kind of close. And in a world where you're just like, all right, here's 2 of these, and the rest of my list is just land speeders, I could see Dark Talon seeing play. Again, I don't think it's like the meta is going to be, oh my goodness, Dark Talons are just like rolling people, but I think it's like getting real close. Just like you could put a Dark Talon on the table in a competitive game and feel fine about it.
Oh wow, that's such a weird gun.
Oh yeah, no, their main gun is just like successful wounds, mortal wounds.
I take back what I said. I actually think this might. I thought a Dark Talon was something different.
No, they have 2 hurricane bolters and a smite cannon, and these things are good.
But your cannons be damned, man.
Yeah, right. 24 bolter shots and this thing. I don't even know how to describe it. It's very good. If you've never been shot at by a Dark Talon, that must be nice.
Raven Ring Black Knights down to 35 points per. These are the plasma.
Yeah, someone at GW just like wants Raven Wing to be viable. Like, let's cut all of their best models by multiple points. Black Knight's down, Storm Speaker's down, Dark Talon's down. Like, I've 100% proposed this list before in like competitive, like my buddies and I getting together, like building competitive lists for each other. Like, we have a Raven Wing player in our team, and I've 100% like you should think about putting all these things in a list. And like, man, that list is 200 points cheaper. Like 5 points per knight, 15 points per Dark Talon, 10 points per speeder. And knights were like already seeing play. Like, knights were fine. Now they're excellent. They have like twin plasma shoot. Like, they have two plasma shots per guy, and their melee is like completely decent. And at 35 points now, they're just like durable for their point cost too. I'm very impressed with these changes. I think Raven Wing's like real. Like, we're going to see Raven Wing. And like, keep in mind too, like a lot of these mission things were like, oh, you need to have OBSEC. Well, pretty good when your OBSEC models are like bikers that can go 20 inches. The Dark Knights, the Black Knights themselves don't have OBSEC, but in that Raven Wing detachment, like biker squads will have OBSEC with them. And like three-man biker squads, just like going 14 inches and doing actions, or actually, I think it's like 17 on turn 1 if you're Raven Wing.
Yep. This
is really good. This is very, very good. Actions are going to be happening in places that they do not normally happen on turn 1.
Yeah, man, I all of a sudden want to play Raven Wing.
Yeah, man. Let me tell you about Dark Town. It's my game.
Yeah. Space Wolves had some changes. I don't know these particular Space Wolf models well enough to really talk about them.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't feel comfortable giving strong opinions about Space Wolves. I just don't feel like I get to play against them enough.
Yeah. I guess let's just finish out the Imperial Factions.
Sure.
Adeptus Sororitas had Morgan Val go up 15 points.
This is not surprising, but it hurts a lot in conjunction with being forced to play mono faction. The sister, like, if you were like, all right, you can still play multi-faction, yeah, Morgan Val needed to go up. I don't know that sisters needed nerfs, given that I think easily the biggest nerf in this book for them is you have to play mono faction, because the way their factions work, they have the shooting faction and the fighting faction, and they have multiple shooting factions and multiple fighting factions, but they don't really have any factions that are good at both at the same time. And now that you play mono faction, like, half of their list is just going to feel really bad. Like, fighty Argent Shroud units just don't do anything. And shooty Bloody Rose models are bad. And now you just like have to feel one of those things, unless you're just like, all right, all melee all the time or all shooting all the time. And sisters are just a very good combined arms force that are all of a sudden not. They're one-dimensional now. On top of this, their bodyguards went up 2 points each. The Celestian Sacrosancts,
yep.
Which is like the melee bodyguards with the storm shields. And that unit was like very good, but at plus 2 points each, like people were bringing like something between 15 and 20 of them. That plus Morven Vol lists are up like 70 points, and also need to cut down to 1 detachment and lose a bunch of their power. Like, I think sisters like dropped a whole tier and a half from this change. They got points buffs, but they got them to their vehicles that were hilariously overcosted. So now they're just a little bit overcosted. Like, I'm not bringing an immolator for 110 points. Like, it's not good. And exorcists were bad before this change, and now they're still bad. Maybe they're not embarrassing anymore, but they're still bad. Maybe there's a world where it's supposed to be like Bloody Rose fighting with like vehicles as they're shooting backup, but I just don't see it.
How do you feel about? So I know we were off Paragon Warsuits before. I saw they went down 10 points per model.
Yeah, 10 points per model makes them kind of interesting. 210 points for 3 of them. Like they can bring multi-meltas, flamers, or heavy bolters. The multi-meltas cost 10 points. As a unit, you can max out a unit's flamer shooting for like with a strat. As like a triple heavy flamer unit. They also have 2 storm bolters each. Like they can put out some firepower. I wouldn't be shocked to see like Ebon Chalice becoming like the thing that you play with. And Ebon Chalice like warsuits are very interesting. Because they can always spike their 6-up invulnerable saves with the Ebon Chalice trait. They can shoot their heavy flamers 21 inches and max out their shots. They're always going to be able to get +1 to advanced charge and exploding 6s as like their trait. I wouldn't be shocked if they start seeing some play, which would be neat because it's a really cool model and they're very different. They might still be. I think they're still a little bit too expensive, but they're getting to the point where like a squad, like they do hit very hard. Like a squad of them might be a thing that we start seeing.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm looking at them and I'm like, they don't need huge buffs to their like melee stats if you're like one of the more shooting factions to like the faction that can advance and charge when you have the. Is that infantry only the one that can advance and shoot their guns though they stood still?
Argent Shroud? No, anyone can do that.
Yeah, you have 8-inch moving models that can get up there, get some shots in, and then do some good charging. I don't know.
Yeah, well, they can't advance and charge, but
right, but
yeah,
getting
and they're core. Like Morgan Vol can like do the thing to them, and that gets very interesting.
AdMech, we already know their changes. They definitely moved down a tier. Grey Knights had point changes. Their Dread Knights went up 10 points, and their Interceptors went up 2 points.
Yeah, Grey Knights are another one where it's just like, this hurts. They got some buffs too, right? I believe their Terminators went down a little bit, as did their Paladins.
Both flavors.
But like Grandmasters up 10. Also, the faction change means that like you can't bring the 5th Grandmaster anymore. Like you just gotta cut him. The joke is you actually have to cut him anyway because that's how much more expensive your list got. They brought 5 Grand Knights, which was now gone up 50 points, and then 30 Interceptors, which is another 60 points. So they have to find 110 points in their list already. But they have to cut the Grandmaster. They're literally not legally allowed to bring the 5th Grandmaster anymore because he has to be a Grandmaster of a different chapter. And you can't bring in multiple factions to the same unit. So they're locked to 4 Grandmasters, to 4 Dread Knights now. And then like these Dread Knights are worse because you can't have 2 of them being Grandmasters with like with different relics and warlord traits going on them. And then on top of that, you're losing out on their like Brotherhood psychic powers for having 2 different good Brotherhood psychic powers happening, 2 different Brotherhood warlord traits happening. The 5th Dread Knight is like kind of hitting critical mass of like, this is a problem I can't deal with. And then like they didn't actually get to put that much more back into their list for cutting that guy. Like Interceptors going up 2 points is brutal. It feels like another double nerf. Now, Grey Knights were starting a lot higher than the Sisters, so it's not as disastrous. Hopefully one of those Premier changes can bring the Terminators to a point where they're playable. But like Strike Squads are still just like a good unit. I don't think Grey Knights are down and out, but they're certainly worse than they were before, and I think they're gonna really struggle to compete with like the true heinous nonsense that's happening at the top of the net, Thick City and Crusher Stampede and Kraken Gaunt Swarm. Carpet.
Yeah, we had already started to see them. We had already started to see them on the way out. So
it's the nail in the coffin. They'll still be playable, but it's not. They're not tier 1 anymore.
So the only thing I can say for them is, as we were saying, strike squads are good. We were talking about like 5-man troop squads being good, especially once they can get places. So like, I think they do have a very good secondary set of missions.
Yeah, their secondary game continues very strong. But their damage output is taking a real hit.
Yeah. Let's do Knights all together at the end, and let's move on to a different faction.
Let's
Chaos or Xenos.
Let's talk about Thousand Suns. Their Volkite Contaminators got nerfed. Their cults got nerfed because you only bring 1, and then nothing else happens. I'm sad about it, but I understand. GW just always forgets this faction exists as long as they're not ruining the meta. Moving on.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit there. So intercessors. Let's do some like comparisons. Like intercessors are worse than rubric marines, right? We can agree to that.
Yeah.
So like probably 1 point more is like an acceptable, and maybe even was too cheap if you consider intercessors correctly costed. I don't, but that's besides the point. Terminators.
I'm not saying rubric marines need to come down. There's other things in the book like Zanger's Zanger Enlightened. Like Zanger Enlightened could have come down in all sorts of different ways. Like they don't do anything right now for 17 points a model with 5 of them mortar waves and no other defensive mechanics.
So you say that, but I actually remember when Thousand Suns were first coming out, people were talking about using Zanger as like scoring units and screening units and that kind of stuff. Same with Zanger
Enlightened. Yeah, but like those people were wrong. Like they didn't do anything. They have like 3 attacks at strength 5 with 2 damage, and those stats are awful in the current meta because it doesn't do anything, and they have no defensive stats at all.
Right. I want to see them change in a little bit. Like Thousands are in this weird place where it's like, I guess you could buff those units. Yeah, you probably should have buffed those units. That's fine.
Yeah, and like the big thing is like all of the competitive T-Suns builds are double cult, and they just got the knees taken out from under them, and they got nothing back. So T-Suns were like an army that were already struggling to exist in the meta, and we just got like a nerf, and that's it. Here's your nerf. Moving on. Well, speaking of nerfs, let's talk about the weirdness of this Death Guard.
Oh, God.
Like this is the nonsense. Chris, we've kind of been talking the whole time. Want to tell us what happened to your boys?
Yeah, so one of the points changes that I will admit is totally warranted is the Foul Blight spawn. He went up 15 points from 75 to 90 points. Everybody was bringing one because it was one of the best models in the range. So totally warranted. Everything else, every other change that they made, just didn't feel like it had any basis in
reality. Yeah,
to be completely honest. So let's go with a points drop here. Plague Burst Crawlers they went down 15 points. Every Death Guard list is taking 2, if not 3 Plague Burst Crawlers to start with. You know, that's what you built your list around.
There were like several Chaos Soup lists that were like, I'm going to soup Death Guard to bring 3 Plague Burst Crawlers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, shit, I did that in 8th edition, you know?
I was literally considering asking you if I could borrow yours at one point. Like, now you're playing with them, but like it's just the best model in Death Guard. It's one of the best models in Chaos.
Yeah, especially with the 9th edition codex bumping up their entropy cannons to D3 plus 3 damage. It's great. It's totally nobody was complaining about points, and nobody was complaining that these are too oppressive. They were pretty, placed.
So it's interesting. I kind of put them in the same spot as Redemptors, where you're either a Terminus S list or you're a list that was bringing 3 of them, and those other ones are starting to feel very samey to me. Like,
yeah.
Speaking of Terminus S, Terminus S is kill. It's fucking dead. Why is it dead? Light Lord, Death Shroud Terminators, a mainstay of most Death Guard armies, went up 5 points. Sure, I mean, totally. I don't think it was warranted, but okay. The 2 nerfs that confuse the shit out of me are Light Lord Terminators going up in points, which were already kind of borderline on viability, just because, like, yeah, they had bolters for shooting, so the fuck gives a shit. And then melee, Death Shroud were just better. and they also gave that valuable bodyguard. So nobody was really taking Blight Lords. You could make a case for like a brick of like 10 Blight Lords. It's risky. And then the weirdest one of all is Poxwalkers, up a point to 6 points. So Terminus S is the Army of Renown, where you can't take any vehicles. It's all infantry. So what do people take? They take Poxwalkers, they take Terminators. They're both more expensive now, and like if you wanted to run a decent amount of Poxwalkers, we're taking like at least 40. And that's just not. There was nothing wrong with them at 5 points. You know?
It's funny. I look at this and I think like someone at GW was like, we want to have a reason to take Plague Marines. And it's just like, well, in order to have you take Plague Marines, we have to nerf everything else. It's like, no. Just buff the Plague Marines. Don't nerf everything else.
That's the baffling part about this. Nobody plays Plague Marines at all, and they weren't touched.
What if I told you all your other models went up 10%? Would you take Plague Marines then?
Yeah, like Death Guard have like a 48% win rate. So like you could convince there's some internal balances issues with the book, because there are internal balance issues with the book.
There absolutely are.
You're like marquee thing, Plague Marines are just like garbage. But like when you have a 48% win rate, that means you buff the thing that you want to see play. You don't nerf everything else. GW, what are you doing with these changes? On top of that, Plague Burst Crawlers down 15. Also, Blight Haulers went down 10, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Like these are like the 2 units in the book that are like really good in these mechanized lists. So we've just like nerfed all the Terminators, nerfed the Plague Bearers. Your normal Marines are already basically garbage. Just go play mechanized, I guess. Like, you just bring 3 Plague Burst Crawlers and like 9 crawlers to every list. Like,
you bring 3 crawlers, you bring 9 haulers, you bring 3 bloat drones, and then you bring in a Chaos Demons detachment. You don't bring Nurglings, because Nurglings are also kill.
And like, I don't understand these changes at all. Also, just in case, like, not just like the points nerfs. I don't know if you've got this, Chris, but like you can't to the last your Plague Burst Crawlers anymore because your Death Shrouds cost more points than them.
Yeah, so
Death Shrouds leapfrogged a 30-point gap and are now more expensive than the Blight Haulers, or not the Blight Haulers, the Plague Burst mortar dudes. And like, what is happening with that?
So that completely also like kills the viability of like that secondary choice now in the current paradigm of like non-Terminus S lists.
Well, Terminus S is gone. Like, you can't play Terminus S.
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying is you can't take to the last anymore because your Death Shroud are going to get got.
Or, alternatively, you could just play like 5-man squads of Plague Marines and all tanks and just take to the last anyway.
So, I also want you to go real quickly going back to the Poxwalker nerf. I want to take us back to the beginning of the podcast where we were talking about missions, where you want to have OBSEC models that can do actions in order for 1/3 of them to play 1/3 of the missions.
They can't even do actions.
And Poxwalkers ate a nerf, and they can't do that.
It's a double nerf. It's a nerf of circumstance and of points.
Like, you have to bring cultists as your OBSEC thing that does actions.
They don't have OBSEC.
Oh god, they don't. You're right, they're core, but they can do actions. All right, you literally have to bring Plague Marines to do the mission.
Yes.
Like, they didn't need to do any of these things. They could have just been like, hey guys, the mission says bring Plague Marines. Like Death Guard players were actually obligated to bring Plague Marines before these things happened.
So,
because cultists don't have OBSEC and Poxwalkers can't do actions. I don't think is there a way of giving like your Terminators OBSEC? I don't think so.
No. So Kevin, you asked right when I said this, like, you know, like, hey, like your best units, like your core units, like just got totally nerfed for no reason, and there's no basis in reality for it. What do you do now? My answer is I'm starting a new army.
Yeah.
Well, if it actually matters, I think you can. I think there's like an argument for like bringing a pure mechanized demon engine list with summoning an Epidemius, and like I think that's pretty powerful.
Summoning
It absolutely is.
He gives real ones to hit your demon engines because he's old school. He's a Carabao core.
Yeah. So he absolutely.
Everything.
So yeah, that list absolutely. It had legs at the beginning of length. And it kind of fell out of favor as like people just start tacking on like Dev Shroud and Volkai Contemptors. But
Chris, the list probably went down like 100 points.
Yeah, it went down 100 points. So that's like another tank. That's another that's one Nurgling now.
That's all the Plague Marines that you need to do your actions.
Yeah, you can still
like
take
you're
a
actually
Plague
going to
Marine
bring a battalion
unit
with 15 Plague Marines, and you're going to spend the rest of your points on tanks. Like 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, and then I think it's like as many Mephitic Plague Haulers as you can fit into your list.
9 is the max.
Yeah, 9. Sure, bring 9. Like, it's great.
Hell, you could even bring Defilers too, and Decimators.
We've run out of heavy support slots, but, because Mephitic Plague Haulers are like fast attacks, aren't they?
They are. They're fast. You could just bring a Spearhead, and you got 6.
Sure. Yeah, I actually think like we can build some really gross Death Guard lists because they've buffed the best things in the book.
You just have to lean hard into mechanization. Yeah,
these changes are completely bizarre to me. I don't understand anything that happened here.
So, under similar notes, let's go to Chaos Demons.
Yeah. All right.
EW, what are you doing?
Lords of Change are in every Chaos Demon list, therefore they must be too good, so they went up 10 more points. There's now a 300-point dude. He's hard to kill. He does about 5 mortal wounds a turn. He's completely garbage at melee, and that's his whole data sheet. I actually don't understand what's happening here. Like his mortal wound output is fine. His durability is insane. But he's not OBSEC. Like, you could just walk 5 intercessors into combat with him. He's not going to kill them in melee. The dude makes 5 attacks, and he's only strength 6. And D3 damage, like, sometimes he gets a wound through, you fail a save, and your guy just lives anyway. Like, you could just, like, walk 5 Marines into melee with him and just, like, seal their objective he's standing on. Like, he doesn't play the mission. His damage output's, like, kind of garbage. You just brought him for durability, and, like, yeah, durable mortals are great. But like at some point, he's 300 points. He could be like 30 pink couriers and a dude to cast spells. Also Nurglings went up to 25 points each. Not that I've like actually seen a Nurgling do anything recently, but if you did, they're gonna stop doing that now.
Be'lakor up 20 points. Like I remember when Be'lakor came out and I saw Admech players put their 20-man troop units into him and kill him with 1 CP. 1 CP, 20-man troop unit, half the cost. Now, admittingly, they don't do that anymore. But like...
it's 2 CP, right?
Now it's 2 CP in 2 different squads, and that's it. So your troop choices, your like Lord of Chaos is just like dying to troop choices from another army.
Bad man.
Yeah, and he's like 400 points now. I don't understand this because like he also like Be'lakor was seeing play. Like people played Be'lakor in these like sweet Slaanesh like 5 greater demon lists, and like clearly GW doesn't like that because they don't want a bunch of greater demons like being the meta. But like it wasn't the meta; it was like viable. People have fun with it. It's not crushing GTs.
But like if that's the issue, the Keeper of Secrets needs to go up, not Be'lakor,
not the Lord of Change.
Yeah. The Lord Change nerf is just like insulting. I can't believe that like Lords went up and Keepers didn't.
But much in the same way, Blight Haulers went down. We also have Flamers of Tzeentch going down 3 points, and Flamers of Tzeentch were a great unit.
So no one actually plays them though. Like I play Flamers of Tzeentch because I'm kind of in love with them. I haven't actually seen like a Flamers of Tzeentch unit like on a competitive table unless I've put it there. But like for those of you who don't know, for 1 CP, they just do like 6 to 7 mortal wounds. Like they just melt things.
So
I remember when that seemed insane. Thank you, Crusher Snapbeat, for changing my opinion.
And because it's an 8th edition codex, there's no like this thing only caps out at like 3 or 6 mortal wounds. No, this does like as many mortal wounds as you roll 6s.
I am like kind of tempted. So there's a Demon of Tzeentch Warlord trait, or even 9-inch aura of reroll 1s to wound. I'm like kind of tempted to take 27 Flamers of Tzeentch and like a dude with that Warlord trait and just like summon more Flamers as my old Flamers die. And just like, this is the plan. I flame people.
Flame on.
Yeah, like it's cool, but man, rest in pieces, Be'lakor and Lords of Change, because apparently we're just going to cut those things and just put more Slaanesh Greater Demons because like those are fine, I guess. I don't understand. Like these changes, most of the changes, like I can figure out a defense for them. The Chaos Demon ones are just unfathomable, as are the Death Guard ones. Like I just don't understand.
It just makes zero. It's like nobody.
Like I haven't actually seen a Nurgling in like a competitive Chaos list in forever. Other than there is like the full on Nurgle, like here is all of my Nurgle bodies. And in the context of this is a thing that came out 6 months ago, like, yeah, 6 months ago, that list was like a thing. But Crusher Stampede's damage output in the form of every dude makes 7 last cannon attacks in melee. Like, yeah, nice beasts of Nurgle, just pick them all up. I don't know. I'm mad. I don't get it.
Good news. Chaos Space Marines, I think, are looking better. Yeah.
We're back to 12 points for the Marine equivalent.
Yeah, 12 points per Chaos Space Marine. This is a change that makes sense. I understand how this happens. I believe a couple other things went down too, right?
Yes. Warp Talons are down 3. Obliterators are down 10. Chris and I played a game probably about 3 months ago now where I was playing Creations of Bile and I brought like all of the models just listed in large numbers. I think that list might have actually lost like 150 points.
Yeah, so I think that list has some legs now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think Warp Talon's at, what are they, 20 each now?
20, yeah.
Yeah. We're getting there on Warp Talon. Especially, I think like it's only in creation. Like in creations, I think we've gotten there.
Yeah. Always 6s to hit big double hits with strength 5 lightning claws, making 4 or 5 attacks a piece. Do Warp Talons start at 2 attack, or they start at 1 attack?
I believe they start at 1.
Just 1, but like 3 attacks each, 4 attacks each on the charge. Like
yeah, because run from Shock Assault to
5 -2/1 exploding on 6s, like rerolling all your wounds. Like I think you're just getting there.
Yeah.
Want to talk about some Xeno stuff?
Yeah.
So real quick for Tyranids, Demacarons went up. Fair enough. Demacarons were dumb. Kevin and I were on the receiving end of one at the doubles event. What the hell? GW, what were you doing with Crusher Stampede and Demacarons? Hive Guard up 5. So fair enough. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Having looked at Crusher Stampede a few times, I think Crusher Stampede needs that 1 point CP strat that does 6 mortal wounds to be nerfed. And I think Warmlord needs to not double move monsters. And I think that list can be fine. I think the Army of Renown can be fine. But those two come together just like make some models just like unbelievably
ridiculous.
Too good.
Yeah.
Ema's so
Hive
good.
Guard went up 5 points. I think most of our like 12 to 16 Hive Guard lists are just going to cut down to 1 unit. Between this and the you can't bring multiple factions anymore. You're going to bring your first 6-man squad in Kraken and then in Leviathan and then just not worry about the other ones.
Yep.
Bunch of the big monsters went down. Exocrines, Tyrannifexes.
Haruspex.
Yeah, Haruspex and Exocrines have like maybe a chance of getting there. But honestly, I think people are just going to like be playing higher duels until that goes away. Like higher duels didn't get touched.
Yeah,
I don't think anything crazy happened
duels are
here.
still pretty good. If for whatever reason you need like mid-board presence and get the specs on there.
Yeah, I don't think anything crazy happened here, so I'm pretty happy moving on. Let's talk about orcs. So orcs, Squig Buggies went up 20. They know what they did, and I'm not sad about it. Scrap Jets went up 10. They know what they did, and I'm not sad about it. War Bosses and Squigosaurs went up 30. And they weren't even seeing that much play, but I think they were insanely pushed, and somehow were completely overshadowed by freebooted shooting to the point where they just didn't actually get played. And GW still recognized that they were way too pushed and pushed them up. There were a lot of nerfs. Commandos got nerfed. The named War Boss on Squigosaur got nerfed. In the world of buffs, they did get some buffs. Some of their wagons got buffed. I don't know that really brings them anywhere. Kilocans got buffed to become very interesting. I think a 35-point Kilocan's kind of tempting, to be honest. It's kind of like a Centurion, but if Centurions could declare 3d6 charges that have deep strike and have 5 wounds each. Overall, orcs still having to play against orcs all the time in competitive. The last couple times I played against orcs, they've just felt busted, completely busted. It didn't matter what my opponent did, as long as he didn't forget to shoot his guns. I felt like I was on the back foot the entire time. And thinking of the list I'm playing against, these changes put about 100 points more into a lot of orc lists, and that's a lot. That might be too much, but it might be the right amount. Orcs felt really, really dumb. Also, they didn't touch the airplanes, which I think is a mistake, but in the context of 6 months ago, I guess I could see how that happened, because people were kind of talking about Docker jets and not WAS bombs, and it turns out WAS bombs were a heinous issue, and Docker jets were really pretending to be a problem. The other thing is that none of these, other than the Squigosaur change, the Goth melee mash list is basically untouched, and that list, while viable and competitive, doesn't feel particularly unhealthy, and just feels like fine for what orcs could be doing. And I still think the freebooter stuff is just viable. It's just no longer this heinously oppressive nonsense. I don't know. Where are you guys at on that?
I still think freebooters can have. I still don't think freebooters is a well-designed trait, and I still think it can lead to some games where orcs kill something small easily, and then just you lose half your army because they rolled 10% better than they should have, and thus, you died.
That's fair.
But that's, I don't know.
No, yeah, there's a reason my 1,000 Suns lists are built so that all my 5-man Rubik squads can start inside rhinos.
Yeah.
And that reason is that I play in a meta where there's a bunch of freebooters, so I can look at my opponent and be like, yeah, this rhino, all my rhinos are touching dents, and I'm the first one you shoot at that you pop, I'm going to immediately pop smoke in the second one. So you're still -1 to hit. It's gross, but it's just how it has to. Kevin, want to talk about Necrons?
Yes. Points decreases everywhere. Yes.
But is it enough?
As a quick side note, I'm very happy that a bunch of these models went down in points after getting buffs in the balanced data slate, because I was concerned that they're going to look at the balanced data slate and be like, ooh, should we buff them? Maybe that made them too good, but they were smart enough not to do that. So on that note, Flayed One's down 3 points. This brings Flayed One down to 10 points. And this is the cheapest reanimating body that Necrons can bring. Or body that reanimates well that Necrons can bring. They also have some good strat support. They have 1 CP, -1 to hit. And they can actually double fight. I may have ordered 40. I might think they're good now.
Yeah, I'm right there with him. Remember when I said we were in the car talking about this for hours? This is one of the things we're talking about. All right, they are 20 Flayed Ones are 40 points cheaper than 20 Warriors. You're just going to give them OBSEC anyway. There's 20 of them, so they're still going to they don't double OBSEC, but they can still just swarm over any objective and completely cover it. the fact that they can double fight means that like the guys from the back of the unit, even on like a short charge, can still just like pile all the way onto an objective and take it. And then they're like the cheapest 20 dudes that you can get. Like killing 20 Necron warriors is a thing that like a lot of armies just like can do with 1 or 2 units. But with flayed ones, like they don't cost that many points and they naturally deep strike. So you don't have to spend a bunch of command points to like figure out how to hide them while you're dealing with your opponent's like machine gun units. Like you can just be like, all right, I'm going to put all my flayed ones in deep strike. My destroyers are going to go after your units. I can like wipe them. And then like on turn 2 or turn 3, boom, flayed ones are on the table. With whatever you have left, like deal with 40 flayed ones that are all OPSEC and going to like try and get you. And they're minus one, they can be -1 to be hit. So they don't have the re-rolls of warriors, but the fact that they be naturally -1 to be hit means that in some ways they can get even tankier than warrior blobs can get.
Yeah. And they eat certain buffs that are only okay. So you can have a lord give them reroll hit rolls of 1 against non-vehicles. Their 6 hit explode. So like that reroll hit rolls of 1 like matters a lot for them. As we said, the double fight, you probably don't even know it, but they do have a -2 leadership aura within 3 inches of them, and like this makes it so that like even when they're going into something like somewhat resilient, you're probably going to kill like 3 models. The -2 leadership, they're probably losing another guy, even if you don't have to pop the double CP. It's like there's enough going on that I like what's happening here. Also on melee monsters, Scorpec Destroyers and Ophidian Destroyers down 5 points. Ophidian Destroyers are probably always supposed to be less than Scorpec Destroyers. This keeps them at the same point cost. And also puts Scorpec Destroyers at 180 points for 3 of them, and that's really good also.
Yeah, this seems Scorpecs are also like a unit that just like has excellent defensive mechanics. Like -1 to be wounded on T5 models is gross.
Locust Destroyers of all varieties down 5 points. I was already kind of in on the you bring 4 regular ones and 1 heavy, and like you just keep ramming the heavy. This just makes that much cheaper. Doomstalkers, Doomday's Arcs down 10 points apiece. The Mefrit Casino list now can bring those guys. I really like Doomstalkers at 130 points. I like
Doomstalkers, but like Doomsday Arcs going down in points is wild because like Necrons had some issues, but like Doomsday Arcs didn't feel like they were one of those issues. I know we meme on them a lot because like their anti-tank cannons like really swingy, but like their anti-infantry power is also fine. The model's like a very convenient shape to have a huge flying thing that can just fly into things and still have all of its anti-infantry firepower function. And they're hyper durable. Like, that's a very tanky.
Yeah. Other big things that went down points: Doomscythe's down 20, Nightscythe's down 15. I was experimenting with Nightscythe's bringing in 20-man warrior blobs, but also like those Scorpec Destroyers that you're bringing in using the strat so they can come in and only have to declare 6-inch charge. So I like the Nightscythe's going down. All the Lord of Wars went down like on average at least 30 points, but some of them more. Yeah, it's Necron's got a lot of buffs.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough to like make them like hyper competitive, but it's like you can play games with Necrons now. Like, and I don't think you're obligated to bring the stupid like everything's double OBSEC and needs to sit on the objectives. And if that's what you want to do, like Flayed Ones are a sweet new tool for that list.
Yeah.
And like all the tanks going down, like the tanks are like already kind of aggressive on their defensive mechanics for their points, even if their offense wasn't great. Yeah, I like all these changes. I think Necrons are going to be. There's some experimenting to do. There's like probably a list in there that is, if not like, well, nothing's beating Crusher Stampede and Thick City out of Necrons, and it shouldn't. Like Crusher and Stampede and Thick City need to get brought down. But I think once that happens, GW, please get on that. Like Necrons might be in a position to just like actually compete with the rest of the 9th edition books, which is sweet.
They did eat. It's funny. They did eat the nerf a lot of other books 8 with like the souping sub factions, which is funny because you think about that souping sub factions as supposed to be a buff for them because like they were limited that they really couldn't soup, and now everyone's on their equal footing. But like their bonuses for being mono sub faction are so small that they would much rather being able to soup than what everyone else was getting.
Yeah, although I think it's also worth noting that I think a lot of factions got worse, and I think Necrons didn't with the change to the new missions and the change to the points that happened. Like Necrons clearly got better with these point changes, and the secondary dynasty where you just say everything is OBSEC. Well, all right, well now every model in my army is eligible for every action in the new mission packet. Like my Doomsday Arcs can like plant bombs and defuse them. And I think this is very good. Like I think that this just really gives Necrons a lot of play in the new mission pack. So the points alone don't tell the whole story. Like I think they're also just the current meta list is very well suited for doing what the new mission is asking armies to do. So that we've been at this for quite some time. I think we've hit a lot of the big highlights. Are there any more guys that we need to make sure we hit? I know we haven't hit literally every faction in a ton of detail.
I think it's worth noting that Jakari got some more buffs because their Forge World stuff got better.
Oh, yep. Tantalus went down some points. I don't know that the Tantalus like does anything, but the Ravager went down.
Yeah.
And the Ravager's like a big laser cannon tank, and has been viable from time to time, and will very possibly be viable again. I don't know that like it gets there. But if thick city lists, because they have to decide, do they want to be Fleshcrafters or do they want to be the +1 to wound, +1 damage faction? Like you can't be both. I'm fairly confident that they're going to pick Crafters of Flesh, which then means that they need to find a new shooty damage output thing. And it might be like Cabal of the Blackheart Ravagers with like that huge cannon with free rerolls to hit, which is great. I'm so glad that Dark Eldar gets to basically dodge all of the nerfs and yet still have good lists.
Yay.
Yeah. Thick City's a menace. It should go away. Have either of you guys like had the misfortune of playing against that list?
It feels like just throwing like a tennis ball against.
Yeah, it's real bad.
If it matters,
yeah.
Okay, good.
Go for it.
If it matters, I think Crusher Stampede might be more of an issue based on what I've seen. And
Yep.
I actually think Crusher Stampede wins that matchup too, which is hilarious.
Yeah, Crusher Stampede is one of the few armies that has like a favorable thing matchup because you just everything's -1 damage. Well, every dude is a damaged 5 melee attack, and they make 9 of them.
Also, if you kill it, fights again.
Yeah, and like Thick City is doing a lot of damage in melee, and then they just fight on death. But yeah, I think overall this is definitely a move in the right direction. In terms of the mono faction locking in, I think GW did some things right and did some things wrong. Overall, for the game, locking everyone into mono faction is a good thing. It reduces complexity and it makes balancing things much less of a nightmare. However, in the moment, I think they completely punted on figuring out which factions got hurt and which ones didn't.
Yes,
like the fact that they did this and then they nerfed Sisters is wild to me because Sisters were already kind of on their way out, and this faction hits Sisters harder than anyone else. So unless their upcoming Codex supplement is just like Bloody Rose can do everything great, this is just a horrible mistake.
I
said,
disagree with what you said about this making things easier to balance, and I'm going to use Sisters as the example. Much like the issues that Space Marines have, where one chapter buffs the melee, one chapter buffs the shooting, I think they're going to run into issues where they're going to have to just decide that Sisters are a shooting faction, and thus all the shooting things are pointed correctly, or they're going to have to decide things are a melee faction. Like I don't think they can correctly point cost that army in a way that like you can do both at the correct point cost anymore.
That's fair. It makes points harder to balance. I was more speaking of codexes.
Sorry.
But yeah, that's true. Right. Like, yeah, like you can, it's like easier to balance like the Sisters Codex in terms of like Argent Shroud has some heinous ruler traits and relics. And sorry, that's not true. Ebon Chalice has some heinous ruler traits and relics that might be very dangerous to be able to mix in with the Bloody Rose supplement that's coming in. And now you just like can't do that. And that makes life a lot easier when you're thinking about that Bloody Rose attachment. And you no longer have to be like, oh man, like this thing's sweet. But if we like let this exist at the same time as like this Argent Shroud multi-melta unit, like we just like this unit, this is like an issue. And now you're just like, all right, like we know the power level of Bloody Rose shooting and we know the power level of Bloody Rose melee. And this is all the army is going to have access to, so we can like balance. And that way it is easier to balance. But you are right. It does make some internal balance things harder. Some books will have more of an issue with it than others. So, for example, the upcoming Tau Codex, every sub-faction is a shooting sub-faction. So that makes internally balancing them against each other way more easy. Because if you give them all a bunch of sweet toys and you let souping, Tau players are just going to soup and get all of the grossest things. And now you just have to be like, pick your package. But yeah, you're right. For books like Sisters, where like there are the melee factions and there's the shooty factions, yeah, that could definitely make points issues. I didn't think of that.
It's kind of similar to like, again, going back to like Black Templars and their Mike Chaplain being really one of the like endemic issues of Space Marines is that every Space Marine it costs the same no matter what chapter you're running. You run some units extremely efficiently. Again, Templars chaps.
All right. Anything else?
Tune in next week for our talk on missions and some other small GT mission pack changes that aren't necessarily missions, like 70 points for losing. Or sorry, captain points.
Here's the only issue with that, Kevin. If we do that podcast next week, I might literally explode because next week is Tau week.
Oh God, you'll never stop talking.
So we may need to talk about Tau, but
fine. No, I want to talk about that, and if we can't do it next week, we need to do it now. So Chris, if I concede to you, what if I tell you can only get 70 points?
I would be set.
What if that's actually a rule? The new GT mission pack.
I would or TOs everywhere to not make that up.
So this is not the exact rule, but it's close. The exact rule is if I concede, I pick up all my models, and then you play the 5 turns of the game, and you get whatever you get, or 70 points. The issue is, depending on what secondaries you've picked, like if you pick Grind Them Down and like Psychic Interrogation, if I pick up all my models, you actually can't score those. So have fun with your 70.
Or you play one of the missions that has to do with killing your opponent's models, and
well, you can still just cap the primary.
Yeah.
But sorry. Well, you can't actually cap it, right?
Well, you can score 12 4 times.
Fair enough.
I mean, I only see one scenario where this is advantageous and it requires you to be a scumbag. That you're trying to submarine so that you don't get like some matchup into like Crusher Stampede or something. And it requires you to deceive your opponent by asking, hey, do you want to end the game right now? And they say, yeah. And you say, well, I don't. You just conceded.
That's not going to work.
That's never going to work. But
the problem, no, the problem where this comes into play is I am playing Tau. This is actually a true statement. I will be playing Tau in the future. That army is going to be disgusting. Spoiler alert. I go first. I kill half my opponent's army, and they're like, I'm done. Concede. Well, I should have gotten 100 points this game, but now I'm getting 70 because I won too hard early. Now this rule is probably not going to be enforced at most competitive events, but the fact that GW put it in the packet is a disaster. It was awful. And some number of TOs out there, like tournaments are like run by shop owners who don't really play the game. They're just gonna be like, yeah, this is what it says in the book. And people are gonna get screwed by it, and it's awful, and I hate it. And GW, what were you thinking when you wrote these words?
I would posit this.
Yeah, I mean, what they were thinking was, if you can move around, you can just still scroll the things. But the fact that your opponent removes all their models means that actually you can't scroll the thing. There are several secondaries that require your opponent to like have models on the table to score them, and now you just can't.
Yeah.
All
You're
right.
playing knights. You thought you could take grind. You grinded really well. Now you don't get grind. Congratulations.
So we are a bit over time, so I think that is probably where we should call it. Next week we'll be here with Tau. So many Tau things, or potentially mission things if Kevin bullies me enough over the week, but probably Tau.
And I'll just blow up your face cam so I'll see this on your.
Chris, do we even need to show up next week?
Honestly, I might just have my cat do it.
Oh no. I will do my best to allow input. I'm sorry.
It's just gonna be me and Kevin just with looks of disgust when you talk about like cannon and railgun and whatever else that lets you ignore every armor and invul save in the game.
All right, Chris, I think it's probably time for you to take us out.
Yeah,
He's starting to move to the faction that has that as a strat. Who's like originally Tau Sept only, and he started to convince himself Morcon's the way to be.
Chris, let's take us out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And thanks for watching. We're live every Monday. Next Monday, it's going to be all about fucking Tau.
Really, really hyping this episode up. Our viewers are really excited about it. By your tone,
just hate watch it because everybody hates Tau.
You have Tau friends, right, Ben? What if we just have them run the podcast next week?
My first army was Tau, and then I realized
you're not a weeb.
Yeah, I realized that my love of Gundam could only take me so far.
You know what? I will do the podcast by myself next week, apparently. Thanks, everyone. We've been 3D6 Charge. Bye for now, and don't roll any ones.
Bye.
Bye.